All right.
Still loading. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Hey, welcome everybody. Happy Christmas Eve for those of you that are celebrating. It's good to be here. We're doing a special broadcast today to share a little bit about an upcoming 7-day challenge that we've got going on starting at the beginning of the year. And before we talk a lot about the challenge, we're just going to share some context around why we're doing it, what it's about, who's it for, all that. And I want to welcome a guest in the space here with me. His name is Joe Quiche, and he's also a men's coach. He's also a relationship coach. He's also an amazing man that I really respect. And it's really good to have you here, Joe. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Honored to be valued. Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm actually I think that covers it well enough for what we need to talk about. But yeah, relationship coach, intimacy coach. Soma and I have crossed a lot of paths in our work, and yeah, appreciate being here.
Yeah. So I want to just jump in, and we can go where we need to go in this conversation. But I wanted to start out by talking about some of the challenges that both of us have seen in the men that we've worked with, in ourselves, in our own journey, and in particular in seeking what it is that we want to create in our lives. And there's often themes that I see that come through that men that reach out to me and men that I have conversations with, and the men's groups and communities that I've been a part of. Like, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the desires that are alive in men. And so I wanted to speak to both what I see men really wanting to create in their lives and what tends to be the challenges around that and getting there. So I'm just going to throw out a couple to start with. I see a lot of men that are hungry for a deeper meaning. In our modern society, because the sort of fabric of our culture is somewhat disheveled. There's not like a consistent cultural identity, and so I see this fragmented experience of what it is to have a depth of meaning, and I think the longing that I felt in myself, seeing a lot of men, is because for many generations prior, for probably since the beginning of time, there was a larger sense of what we're here to do had a purpose. It was part of a collective orientation, like the sense of solidarity with community. And I think the absence of that creates this longing. And I don't think we're going to completely correct the cultural piece very quickly, but I do see there's certain steps we can take as men on a personal level to start creating more of that sense of like, my life matters, for something bigger than me. I'm actually a part of something larger. So that I wanted to start with that because it just feels so primary to me.
Having a sense of collective connection and purpose, you're saying?
Yeah.
Tribe.
for sure. Yeah. And it's a big part of our ancestry, our collective heritage was to have that belonging. It's hard to live without it.
Yeah. So you're I definitely work one-on-one with men, and I think after we spent some time talking about this today, and the number of times we've talked, it's clear you have a bit more grasp on how men generally tend to come to you with these sorts of problems. And I work in a similar way. So you'll have to, but you're more clear on the identity that men tend to run with today. So you have to kind of like may have to narrow me in with our conversation a little bit. But
For sure.
what I have, what I, I know it's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking about how I wanted so badly as a boy, as a teen, to connect with men. My older brother, I looked up to him. I remember every single time my brother would, he would do something new. I thought it was the coolest thing on the planet. I was like, I want to be like my brother. He didn't like that, growing up. I was kind of like a nuisance, I guess, to him, but there was always that strong desire to be like, well, I want to be like X, or looking up to, I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger was a role model in my eyes. And I was always looking to men who were older than me to be able to connect with them in a way that just felt like purposeful, meaningful, or like maybe I could grip onto some sense of identification of who I was. And interestingly enough, like my entire, like what I do now has evolved from my sense of connecting more deeply with myself in a way that allowed me to be the person that I wanted to be, that I was trying to be through them. So it's interesting because despite the fact that I couldn't quite get it as a kid, I didn't have it through the men I was raised with. I kind of evolved that sense of identity of, well, how do I end up being, how do I end up creating that sort of space where other people can experience that evolution within themselves? So,
I love that. Yeah.
But I'm curious, what's the origins of your sense of why this is so meaningful to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I had a similar hunger, though I don't think I was completely aware of it as a younger guy, like, in my teens and before that. Like, I definitely looked up to I got two older brothers, right? And it was, yeah, there was some sense of, they gave me a frame to fit in. Like, this is, something I want to be more like them, right? Similar. And, I had maybe a few heroic figures, though they were probably more on the fictional end of the spectrum, Superman. Yeah. But I think there was even in that, and I think there's probably a reason why young boys really connect to the superhero in a way of, there's a sense of masculinity that's expressed as powerful, right? Like
Right.
that human, even Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? He was almost superhuman like at that time, right? He was Mr. Universe, right? So
With the movies he was in, I definitely
Terminator, right? All of that. So yeah. So yeah, I think there is, and this speaks to another piece that I really see this hunger for in men, which is around self-actualization, right? Like, it's almost like the way I've experienced it. There's a part of me that can feel my potential as a human, even as superhuman, right? Like I think as humans, we've only broadly accessed a small amount of our true potential.
Right.
And
Agreed.
I think, one thing that did happen in my teenage years that gave me a larger sense of our human potential was, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, was experimenting with some psychedelics. And you one of those experiences that really turned me on was feeling these sort of extra sensory capabilities that came online, in a real visceral way and under the influence of some of these psychedelics. So in particular, like more of like a telepathy, the ability to see kind of more of the matrix, right?
Mhm.
More of the fabric of what we're all made of, and and that,
Talking about multiple dimensions or sort of an awareness.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Which it's like we could look at it as multiple dimensions. How I experienced it was more like they gave me a glimpse into the truth of what's already here. We're just somehow conditioned to not see it, maybe because it's too much, maybe because it's overwhelming. And so yeah, those experiences actually became a catalyst for a lot of the growth work that I've invested myself in, because I wanted to be accessing my full potential as a
Right.
human. And so I'm curious. I know there are men watching. I can't exactly see the men that are on Instagram, but if people are tuned in on Facebook, I think if you want to engage in this conversation, you can chat, and that will come through this software I'm using. It's just invitation. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. There's the that hunger for, like, I want to be the best version of me, right?
Right. So we get that comes along with sort of what did you call it? Oh, self-actualization. So I've actually done quite a bit of reading on the concepts of how do we live our fullest potential. And um, there fortunately there are a lot of different resources out there for men to really evolve that. And I think that one of the things that's really beneficial about that is that when we have through when I was a kid and when I was a teen, one of the things that was, I know for sure, looking back in retrospect, what I was missing was a sense of, that part of me that was searching for identity was the same part of me that wanted to simultaneously live out that self-actualization that you're calling about. And I think I would call it more like a meaning, right? Like for me personally, um, when I can really define who I am and define how I can become that, it's like there's a greater fire that's lit within me that just stays stoked constantly if I'm once I access it. And that's what when I see that now within myself, I realize that was the biggest thing that I was missing back then. Like somebody to hand me some awareness of how do I stoke that fire, because I'm dying to, I know it's there. And so my life has been one of discovering that, finding the tools, finding the resources, connecting with the right men, reading the books, doing the practices, to really stoke that fire and to learn how to keep it stoked every single day. Like, it's interesting. Even I'm even talking about it. I'm like, I feel it as I'm talking. It's like an awareness of this thing that's been subsurface for decades.
Yeah, yeah. I love how you talk about it as fire, right? And there's something, you know, catalyzing about the energy of fire. It's this kind of living force, and And I agree. I relate to it as something, it's, there's like a combustion, there's something that drives me forward. And I think that, as we were talking before this call about some of the, aspirations that we see in men, one of those big pieces, and I would say these are all related to each other in some way, is having a sense of direction, right? Like knowing where we're headed. And I think a lot of modern men struggle with that. Like, some men maybe find direction, but it's not meaningful, right? They're just doing what they're told that they should be doing, right? And so there's a different quality that I found when what's calling me forward in my life is generated from like a deeper source, from just different takes on this. I like the term soul personally, because it feels something that's true to my essence, that nobody can really argue with. It's just what's true. And yeah, so I invite men that are tuned into this discussion, if you've felt that sort of pain of not being clear on what you're doing, right? Or that you are doing things, but what you're doing doesn't really feel connected to what's important to you. That's, first off, I just wanted to say that that's kind of a normal part of the process, is getting to that pain, getting to that frustration in a way. And it's really important to name that, because a lot of men I see punishing themselves over it, right? There's something wrong with me because I haven't figured it out. And
Something that feels like it's missing.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, I mean, it feels like a good way to segue a little bit into my take on that pain, which again I think is a necessary ingredient in the transformational journey that is life. Like we need to meet suffering. And one of the problems that I see with that is we're conditioned to avoid it, right? We're conditioned to escape it. We have all these mechanisms to not feel what we're feeling. And I'm just going to pause there, because I know I can go on and on about
Yeah,
things.
no, I if I'm going to jump back to this evolution of my life from my childhood and wanting to follow others, to become who I am, to recognize my own purpose, my own meaning, and connection with other men, sort of the warrior archetype living through me, wanting to be alive and wanting to know how to live. I didn't have it as a child. I didn't have it as a teen. I didn't have it going into my 20s, and there was always a search. So that search and not having it, I'm a firm believer that, we say the word tribe. I'm a firm believer that just as things were in tribal days, that when we have the community that we need of other men to teach us how to be men, then that meaning and purpose sets in rather quickly. Mm-hmm. It's like we go through there's a process they would call initiations, or, we call them initiations today, rites of passage, right? They probably didn't call them that then. They knew it needed to happen. Boy needs to become a man. And so in today's culture, we're lacking that. I read largely the reason that occurs is because the industrialization of the major companies prevents that from occurring. So families are away from mother and father, away from home more frequently. Child has to basically raise himself, figure things out on his own. And so that leaves this sort of gap. And now the gap of not having learned how to become who he is, he searches outside of himself for in porn, in Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, constant use of the social medias, and so many ways that we give ourselves away by distraction and lose ourselves because we haven't had that raising us that comes from our culture. So it was definitely there for me, and I can even say that there were times that I had bouts with depression. I can go into that, and we won't go there, but depression, alcohol, especially in my late teens, early 20s, and sex for sure. So I know that has certainly been a part of my challenge in becoming who I've had to become for myself, the soul, as you might say.
Right. Yeah, and there's something about that, gap, or that void, right? Like almost in our collective unconscious part of our psyche, right? Where these initiations that have happened for millennia are now absent, right? With the industrialized culture. And, when we're missing something, right? We want to try to fill the void, right? We want to try to put something there that gives us a sense of completeness,
Right.
And so I think that's a big part of this sort of mechanism of this hunger, right? Is this something's missing? I'm going to go look for it outside of me so that I can feel better, so that I can feel more complete. And again, I mean, we can do this with relationships, we can do this with food, we can do this with substance use, all kinds of stuff, right? We can fill our void. And so there's in the masculine psyche, there's a need to be shepherded into the next stage of life, into becoming an emotionally mature man that can hold others, that can be courageous, that can take risks, that can that knows what he stands for.
That discovers himself through challenging himself, through being challenged.
Yeah, right. And that's the other part of these mechanisms of trying to fill the void, is they kind of soften us, they in not a useful way, they weaken us, they weaken our resilience to do the uncomfortable things that we need to do in order to grow, right? And just like if we were growing our muscles, right, we need to feel it, we need to feel the pain, we need to feel the resistance, we need to lean into those edges. And most of these mechanisms really just dull us, they keep us from, they're numbing, they're numbing us from feeling. And so part of what I believe is an aspect of masculine initiation is, in a way, being able, like, developing the capacity to sit in the fire and to stay with the discomfort, to meet our edges. And it's hard to do that alone, right? It's scary. And this is why we need elders, or at least men that have walked the path before us, because they model it, they transmit it through their being. And there's not a lot of men like that out there. And so part of why we do what we do is because I'll just speak for myself, like I'm trying to create a new culture of masculinity that brings back some of these aspects of the old culture that I think were really essential to helping us to evolve collectively.
Agreed. I have over the course of the last year, what I did was I've collected all sorts of different material on rites of passage and initiations, and learned quite a bit about that process. Even having told you once that I doing a guided imagery and a really powerful and potent process for a man. And there's two parts to this that you just recently picked up a book that I listened to already, the audiobook Dopamine Nation. And I see that as tying very much into this. I don't know if it was in that book they said it, but in another book on what they essentially called porn addiction in the book. There's this process that the mind goes through, right? So if we are already able to have the things around us that define who we are, we have sensitized ourselves and basically become familiar to other men that teach us how we are, other men that challenge us, other elders that give us the wisdom that we otherwise wouldn't have, go through these initiatory process. A lot of times, the reason that we don't have as much of an interest or desire to do them is because those things that we've surrounded ourselves with, the phones and the alcohol and sex, there's actually a process. I don't want to get too much into this because science of it is not as necessary as the importance of the steps we take, but when we do this, there's actually a part of our physiological, biological process that sees those things, sensitizes ourselves, familiarizes ourselves to those things as important. But then the dopamine that we essentially gets kicked out from the reward centers within our brain from having done those, it elevates the dopamine within our brains. But then what it does is we have to do more in order to feel satisfaction from those particular activities. And so that's why there's a greater desire to pursue them, is like, because doing more, we have to do more of those things to feel the same level of fulfillment that we felt when we started doing them. So that's the process of sensitization within our body. So in order to, once we get pulled aside by those things and distracted by them, we are less sensitized to the things that are important, meaningful, depth of relationship and partnership with friends, with men, through the elders. And so having environments like the things that you and I are creating and cultivating is essential, because it gives men one of the few opportunities they have to take their attention away from these things that they've become sensitized to, and sensitize themselves to another way of living, invite themselves into a connection with men that they can then find meaning with, that they're not going to find meaning with in those other places.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I'm not a total geek on the science end of it, just because I don't go down that route completely. But I've seen in the men that I've worked with and in myself, the gift of, I guess, training our bodies and our nervous systems around experiences that are, I don't know the right word for it, but the opposite of short-term gratification, right? And one term that I like to use is nourishment, or another way of putting it is like more of a primary satisfaction, and these short-term pleasures in some way, they like you said, they they condition us around needing more of that, right? And so it really takes a conscious effort to break those habits. And unfortunately, we have all these um, highly invested programmers and media development companies that are hacking our brains and conditioning us to having everything at the swipe of our thumbs. And so men don't have to hunt for what they need to hunt for in life anymore. So this is why I think a lot of men struggle with depression, why men commit suicide more often. I mean, there's other layers to this, another one being that men tend to be pretty isolated emotionally. They don't share about what's going on as much as women do. And so, this creates this negative feedback loop when we are going through a difficult time, difficult passageway where, we keep ourselves separate, and it just ends up perpetuating, depression, addiction, suicide, in this endless loop. So, this is why one reason why we've created this challenge. We really strongly believe in the power of a container for men to develop the discipline, the accountability, the sense of solidarity with other men, and the way that men can learn from each other indirectly, just through shared experience, right? Just through being in an environment that where we get to witness each other, which we don't often have. We don't have
Right.
boys going to work with men and learning how to hunt or build something or farm. So this is a great way that we get to learn new skills in community together. And I'll just tag team with you there if you want to share a little bit more about the structure of the reset challenge, is what we've called it, and just why you think it's going to serve men.
Yeah, so there's a there's a tremendous amount of value in the 7-day challenge. I use a practice every single day, a couple of practices actually, and I believe they're in this. But having those practices, breath practices, and gratitude practices, and I don't think we have the gratitude practice in it, but breath practices, gratitude practices, things like cold showers, having these be part of a ritualistic part of the day is such a critical part of being present for me. Just feeling I can be in my body despite all of the intense distractions that I might run into in a given day. And with regard to 7 days, I think that's 7 days is a great time frame to get started into an awareness, so developing a real keen awareness of how beneficial these sorts of practices are. And so having two men have practiced a lot in this area with these types of practices, and understanding how beneficial ritual is and breath work is, and being guided into it over the course of 7 days, it gives you a real deep connection to self, a real deep awareness of how you would benefit from just separating yourself from the distractions, investing yourself into this, and seeing how dramatically your life would change, and your sense of self will change over the course of that time. That's how I see it. I think
Yeah.
7 days is, I mean, especially given what we have. These, I will say that what we've packed into this is a rich number of tools, resources, and processes to help them in really substantial ways.
Yeah, agreed. And it's an initiation of sorts, right? It's an initiation in a practice-based mindset. It's a initiation into embodiment, if that's something that you're unfamiliar with. Even if you've done some breath work or some yoga or some martial arts, it's different when you come together in a practice community and do it together. Like there's an energy that's generated collectively that we can work with, that helps the momentum, that helps us to carry that forward into our personal lives. And so I'm just going to speak a little bit more deliberately to the elements of it. We touched on them, but so we're going to be working with the body, with a foundation of embodiment practice. So that's going to include, some kind of breath work, some kind of movement, and some kind of meditative practice, right? So we're cultivating a still mind. Many of us can get into patterns of ruminating thoughts, living in these narratives that we've carried forward since childhood. So it's a way to reset those things and come into the present moment and learn to see the world from a clearer place than this kind of haze of our thoughts and our stories, and even these old identities that really don't represent the truth of who we are at a deeper level. So it's there's the body reset, there's a mind reset. So we're going to be using journaling as part of that. So both of us get a lot of value from a journaling practice. And
I'm pretty sure I could dig up evidence that writing, like drawing things, basically writing things, can help you gain access to parts of yourself that are completely outside of your awareness in quite profound ways. I've been writing for a long time, and that's the benefit I've gotten from it for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And it has a way of bringing up, if done with an intentional focus, it can bring up subconscious stuff that is kind of running in the background of our awareness. And one final aspect to the reset is a space reset. And so the way I see it, not only is our environment, like how we set up our environment, how we maintain our environment, kind of a reflection of our consciousness, right? So if you don't make your bed in the morning, and you're leaving dirty dishes in the sink, and there's nothing inherently bad or wrong about those things, but it's it has an impact on us, right? We're impacted by what we surround ourselves with, even as visually, we're taking everything in,
all of it. Yes.
And
it's
so
the sound, the visuals, the people we surround ourselves, the way the things in our lives are set up, and how meticulously we care for them. It's absolutely a reflection back to us of how much of who we are, our own sense of identity.
Yeah. So if your environment is chaotic, right, like that's probably a little bit of your experience internally, and this goes down to everything from like your car to your phone, all the apps you have on your phone or whatever. So we're probably not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of all of that, but it's going to be an opportunity to assess your space and see, within 7 days, like what can you reset in your environment that is kind of setting a tone for how you want to be showing up in your life, how you want to be experiencing your world, all of that.
How you want to be seen by the world around you.
Be seen.
Experienced.
Absolutely.
as a trustable man, as an integrous man, as a man who's comfortable with his own masculinity and his own feminine, all of the above.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, I mean, those of you that can see my environment and, Joe's is like, you know, just because you're a masculine man doesn't mean you can't appreciate art and beauty and, creating an aesthetic space, right? That's a big part of my expression as a man. And so that's something to consider too. It's like what you invest yourself in, right? Like what do you value and how are you bringing that into your space? So, we could go on and on about this. It's these are life practices, and we're going to be touching the surface of them. We're not going to, be going as deep as we can in these 7 days, but we're going to go deep, and there's a lot that can be accomplished in 7 days as a reset, as a reframing of how you're moving through the world. And I ran this challenge in 2020, right around when COVID hit. And it was powerful to see men from around the world coming together in community, practicing together, showing up, supporting one another. The other piece that's going to be a part of this challenge is there's going to be a little competitive edge. There's competition, and some of us can view competition negatively. We're trying to reframe competition as a tool to help us all to challenge one another, to push our edges, right? So there's something in the masculine in particular that is oriented around winning, right, and succeeding and accomplishment. And of course that can be driven to an extreme place, but for a lot of men that's a need, right? Like it gives us somewhere to move in our lives. And when we're doing it collectively, I think it can help us to push past what we believe that we're capable of if we were just to try to do the same thing alone.
Yeah, there's an identity that you can acquire through collective purpose and support. I'm not a big fan of this word support, not because I don't think it's accurate, but because I think it really takes away from what is possible, right? I wish there was I'm not coming up with a better word, but when I was a wrestler and I was a football player, and I didn't feel supported by the men that I was wrestling with and fighting or playing football with. But what I did feel was a collective sense of some masculine purpose. We were together on this. We were looking to achieve and accomplish something collectively. And I think that that's one thing a lot of men are missing. And this is certainly something you'll be able to experience here in what we're doing. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. So last couple details before we wrap up this conversation. We've got a platform that is going to be hosting the challenge. It's a social network type of thing, but it's not on Facebook. So part of the invitation, the challenge is to get off of social media. It's kind of ironic that we're promoting it here, but it's a big thing that a lot of us are wrestling with, right? Like how to engage with these tools, which seemingly are about creating community, but a lot of us end up feeling more disconnected and more sort of hungry, just feeding this, the void in us in our relationship to them. So it's in a way reorienting around how can I be more of a creator and a contributor than just a consumer around social media. And to help and support that, we're pulling it off of the major social media networks, building it within a private network. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're going to get to connect there. We're going to connect on live Zoom calls. We're going to practice together. And yeah, at the end of it, the end of the competition part of it, we're going to be giving away some awards to the men that really play full out, that really play to their edge and show up not just for themselves, but for the other men in the community. So what else? I think that's most of the details, other than it's only $9, which is, I think we're offering a ton of value for $9. But, I actually did this free last time. And, there's one thing about seeing men that are actually willing to invest in themselves. And I'm actually, as a coach, it's hard to work with men that aren't willing to put some money on the line. Like money to a man is symbolic of, his energy and his investment in what he believes in to some degree, right? What he values. So turning that on yourself, like choosing to invest in valuing yourself is a powerful ritual act. And so, it's affordable. Anybody should be able to do this. If you really can't afford $9, then, reach out to me and I will comp you. But in general, I think most men can step up and put that investment on the line. And I think that's about it. Anything else you want to add?
No, I just, you said you think that it's worth it. I would say, I know it's worth it. I would stretch that far, and yeah, you gentlemen will get a ton of value out of this, and I say do it.
Yeah, we got, a handful of men that have already signed up. We're going to be sharing this across all mediums over the next few days and try to have a nice full group. So I know we're in the middle of the holiday hustle and bustle and whatever else you got going on. So this is actually a great opportunity to reorient around this time of year, where a lot of people kind of check out, right? Kind of a lot of people just fall into old patterns. And so, use this, join this tribe, and use it as a way to launch into your new year powerfully, intentionally, and, with a sense of collective action. Thank you for tuning in, whoever's here. And if you're hearing this broadcast later on down the line, we're gonna post some links for you to join. You can also message either one of us on Facebook or Instagram. You want to just give them your contacts?
Yeah. So if you're not already connected to me, Joe Keich, JoeKeich, is my handle on Facebook. Joseph Keich, JosephKeich, is my handle on Instagram, and JoeKeich coaching@gmail.com. Those are the three best ways to communicate with me. Or just reply with a comment on this post, and I'll respond.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for joining me, Joe.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, if that's what you celebrate. And actually, I forgot to mention this, but today is Joe's birthday also. So just want to celebrate you, Joe. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And we both realized that we were born in the same year. Today.
1979 was a good year.
Yeah. So if you're rocking the 1979, make sure you join the challenge. All right, everybody, have a beautiful holiday, and we'll